Hi everyone, welcome back to another video, and we are continuing our series on vampirism, the science behind the myths, and today we're talking about erythropoietic protoporphyria. And erythropoietic refers to synthesis of red blood cells, which happens in the bone marrow. It also happens in the liver. So we're going to see some bone marrow effects, we're going to see some liver effects, and also some skin effects from this porphyria. And we're also going to see some overlap from AIP and PCT, although we have some very unique features with EPP as well related to this enzyme that is deficient in this case. We're also going to add on the remainder of the enzymes in this pathway that we didn't cover already. So we are finally finishing up the heme synthesis pathway, finishing off with erythropoietic protoporphyria, which is what happens when the final step doesn't happen. And last time I mentioned that this type of porphyria is pediatric. And this is true because EPP is primarily inherited. So if you think about how in a lot of myths, you have families of vampires. And the reason why there are families of vampires is this is an autosomal recessive mutation. So if you have both parents who have this disease, and they will guarantee to pass it on to their children. If you had only one parent that had the disease, it's not very likely that the kid's going to have it unless the other parent also has a heterozygous mutation, which is very rare in something like this. But if you have somebody that's been ostracized from society for being a vampire, they had EPP as a kid, they grew up, they probably won't be able to find a partner in general society. They might be in relationships with other people with this same condition because they identify with each other. They are both kind of, in a sense, stuck together. They've all they've got. So you'd have more of a chance of having families all having this type of condition. So this is autosomal recessive mutation of the Fetch gene. Fetch stands for ferrochelatase, and that is the final enzyme in the pathway that we're going to talk about. But not only do we have an inherited type of EPP, you can also get this very, very, very rarely as an adult from cancers or precancers of the bone marrow. So myelodysplastic diseases and myeloproliferative diseases, all diseases of bone marrow, can also potentially lead to EPP, though it's very, very rare. There's also another enzyme that could cause inherited EPP, but that's also really uncommon, so we're just going to focus on Fetch and ferrochelatase today. So looking at our pathway from last time, I'm not putting in all of the enzymes that we covered previously, because that takes a lot of space, and we are very out of space with this pathway. It's getting longer and longer. So we have glycine succinyl-CoA converted to ALA, converted to PBG, converted to hydroxymethylbilane, converted to uroporphyrinogen 3, which is then converted to coproporphyrinogen 3. And last time we talked about this side pathway where hydroxymethylbilane builds up and then goes and becomes uroporphyrinogen 1 and uroporphyrin 1. But we're not going to focus on that because that part of this pathway does not really matter for EPP, because we're going to focus farther down the line of this pathway. The next step after coproporphyrinogen 3, it's going to be converted to protoporphyrinogen 9 by coproporphyrinogen oxidase. So where we had porphyrins before, now we have protoporphyrins. And it's going to be a little bit different with a protoporphyrin than it will be with porphyrins. So this protoporphyrinogen, the gene saying that it is a precursor to protoporphyrin 9, converted by protoporphyrinogen oxidase, so converting this precursor to its regular protoporphyrin state, and then this is the final step before heme synthesis. So what we need in order to make heme, we need this protoporphyrin 9, and we also need iron. So we have iron 2+, which is going to be combined with this protoporphyrin via ferrochelatase to produce heme. So in EPP, as I mentioned, the problem enzyme is ferrochelatase. So look at this pathway, pause the video if you'd like to figure out what would happen if we just get rid of ferrochelatase. So we get rid of ferrochelatase. We cannot produce heme. So heme does not happen. So what happens then is we get a buildup of protoporphyrin IX. And as I said, this is a protoporphyrin, but also we have iron now that we're not using, and we'll get into that. But we have this protoporphyrin that builds up, and then that is going to cause our symptoms of EPP. So the biggest difference and almost overlap with PCT is that we do have sunlight sensitivity in EPP. However, this type is non-blistering. So if you see a porphyria that is blistering, it's probably PCT or another type of cutaneous porphyria. EPP is not really a cutaneous porphyria. It's more of a hepatic porphyria. So we are getting non-blistering sunlight sensitivity. So they're still going to avoid going outside in the sunlight. But when they go out, it's unlikely that you're going to see blisters. You're going to more see something like a sunburn, or you might see some lichenification. So the skin becomes more tough, like almost leathery. You're going to get telangiectasias, which are kind of dilated blood vessels, and that's going to come also from the liver issues that we see. But we have this non-blistering sunlight sensitivity, and the reason why it's non-blistering is because protoporphyrins are hydrophobic. So porphyrins are hydrophilic, so they enjoy being around water, as much as I can say that. They don't really enjoy anything, but that's how we describe it. They are okay being in the presence of water, so you can build up these blisters of fluid in the skin with this accumulation of water. Protoporphyrins are hydrophobic, so they are not going to build up in water. They're going to build up in fat tissue, so it's going to be buried more in the lipids. So that's why you don't see blistering with these protoporphyrins. And with this same thing as PCT and AIP, you're going to get oxidative damage because you have, not only do you have the Fenton reaction from this iron that has nowhere to go, but you have porphyrins that can cause oxidative damage as well. With polarized light causes porphyrins to react, cause oxidative damage. Interestingly enough, so when I talked about AIP, I mentioned how you're not presenting with an iron deficiency anemia necessarily, and what the differences would be for a porphyria versus an anemia. And that difference, as I said, was that we had enough iron, but we didn't have enough of the other substrates, in this case, protoporphyrin. But here, we have enough protoporphyrin, and we do have iron, but we're going to have some feedback mechanisms in the body to where we can't use the iron anymore, so we're going to stop absorbing it, and it's going to present like an iron deficiency anemia because we're not using the iron in the blood. We're not going to be absorbing it much more. So with this, you're going to get a microcytic anemia with small red blood cells. And so that's going to be a result of that. Cholestasis is another complication of EPP, and this relates to with the liver issues. But this is where bile builds up in the liver and it can't leave. So if you have bile staying in the liver and in the gallbladder, you're going to get gallstones and you're going to get pruritus. Pruritus is itching. So bile, when it's stuck in wherever it is, bile is very itchy and very irritating. So you're going to have buildup of bile, and it can cause skin itching, which can also go along with the non-blistering sunlight sensitivity. You also get peripheral neuropathy, very similar to somebody with diabetes, where they might lose sensation in their extremities. They might have numbness or tingling in their fingers and toes. That's peripheral neuropathy. It's something that overlaps with certain vitamin B12 deficiencies, but this can also be seen here in EPP. The biggest issue with EPP is protoporphyric hepatopathy, and this is the underlying condition for why we'd see cholestasis, but this is really where the big differences come in. So you get jaundice. So you might also have some pallor with the iron deficiency anemia and just the general presentation of anemia. But here you're also getting jaundice. And back then, when people didn't know what caused jaundice, you have people who are bright yellow, their eyes are bright yellow, and that can be frightening. That can lead to weird religious conspiracies with people who are yellow or very pale, and they have family members who are all the same way. And you could see where this might cause problems. They also might have some right upper quadrant pain where their liver is, also elevated liver function tests. You wouldn't see those back in the vampire days, but just so you know, if you were to test somebody's liver with EPP, you would get very elevated liver enzymes. And also, lastly, you can get vitamin D deficiency, and this is caused by, not really by the porphyria itself, but by the inability to go outside in sunlight. If you don't go out in sunlight, you're going to probably be vitamin D deficient, and then you're also going to be at risk for osteoporosis. So this was a lot. In the past few videos, we talked a lot about hematology and porphyrias, how these pathways work. I'm going to probably talk also about lead poisoning, because lead poisoning can cause two different types of porphyrias, and also sideroblastic anemia. We won't get much into that part, but lead poisoning could also be a contributor to the vampire myths. So I hope you liked all of this complicated information. I know it's been a lot these past few videos. Thanks for sticking around, and I will see you all in the next one.